morning, tapering off. We'll have strong winds in the morning.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today's February the 25th. This is the Salina City Commission's regularly scheduled meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order and ask the clerk to call the roll.
Mayor Jennings.
Here.
Commissioner Angel.
Here.
Commissioner Crawford.
Here.
Commissioner Householder.
Here.
Commissioner Shirley.
Here.
Would all those that are able please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance in a moment of silence. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Start our meeting today with the citizens forum. If we have any citizens that would like to come forward, please come to the podium, state your name, address, and you're welcome to give us comments or anything on things that are not a part of today's agenda. During each one of those items, you'll have an opportunity to give comment then. Sir?
I filed a petition here some time ago.
Could you please state your name and address?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Joseph Minneman, M-I-N-N-E-M-A-N, 621 North 13th Street.
Welcome.
I said I filed a petition to vacate a portion of West Grand Avenue some time back, and I've been trying to get the matter resolved because the city has taken and violated some of my legal rights. I have a right of access from my property onto the new Grand Avenue, and I don't have it. I've discussed this with Mr. Banks, and he understands the problem, and I've been working with him, and I was hoping we could get something resolved. I do live out of town, so I don't get into town too often, but I'd like to get either the property that I'm entitled to or get some damages for it. I mean, I'm entitled to either one. It's an easy way to work out the agreement.
Mr. Binkson, is this something that is in process or something that we need to?
That would be a fair way to characterize it. Mr. Miniman has certainly been in conversation with me on multiple occasions, and we have tried to maintain communications, although I can understand why he would wonder why it is taking quite as long as it is. We're trying to address the city's situation and position, as well as how the matter might be resolved in everyone's mutual interest. But it is something we certainly need to address and resolve conclusively, and that is something that we're working on. But I can understand why Mr. Miniman might be concerned that we try to accelerate that process.
Okay.
Well, this matter was filed. When did I file my petition? You guys, I shouldn't say you guys, the commission themselves. You rejected the petition and said you didn't want to vacate the street. And the argument I heard from the commission or the people that work for the city was that I still have access to my property on 13th Street. I heard that argument because of, however, I'm not arguing the city cannot vacate the street. I am arguing that the city cannot close my private right of egress and ingress from 623 property onto Grand Avenue. And that's what you've done. It's that simple. And I have a legal right to access 623 on the Grand Avenue, which I had before you closed the street and rerouted it. Now I don't have access to Grand Avenue. I don't know why the city went ahead and did this without filing condemnation proceedings. I've never heard of that before. You want to condemn the property, well, that's fine, you know. When you condemn it, you make me an offer I can't refuse, supposedly. It doesn't usually work out that way on condemnation, and it's not a big piece of property. going to take the little triangle piece of property that you guys left when you cut off my access, resolve the matter. I put that in my petition. I thought it was pretty clear. The city commission or the personnel that checked into this never did contact me. I left my phone number. If there was a problem with the petition, I should have had a hearing here. I'd have testified and told you anything you needed to know. But nobody contacted me and says, oh, your petition's coming up today. At the hearing, you better be there because we want to know what's going on. And all I got was a letter back that you were rejecting my petition, which was not based on much legal evidence that I could see or legal argument that I could see. Like I said, I've been discussing this with Mr. Bankson for quite some time, and back when we met last Thanksgiving, didn't we? Right after Thanksgiving.
That would have been about that time, yes.
And I sent a follow-up letter recently, and I said, I'm back in town.
I did get your letter saying that you would be in town before the end of the month, and I didn't know exactly when that would be, but I'm certainly happy to continue to work on the matter with you, as I'm sure all the relevant staff is.
What do we need to do, Mr. Banks? You know, I've discussed it. I mean, either deed the property over to me or file a petition of some kind to condemn my legal interest. I got a right of access, and I don't have it.
Well,
That's the legal issue, you know. You know, the city's only got one right. It's got a right of way on the street. I've got a right of way on the street, plus I got a right of way from my property onto the street. That's the law.
How long are you back in town, sir?
I'm hoping to leave tomorrow, but I may not be able to leave till Wednesday.
Okay. Is, Mr. Gage, is it possible for there to be just any meeting? Is that appropriate or inappropriate while he's still in town on where things are in process?
Well, certainly, I had anticipated, and speaking with Mr. Miniman, when he did come to town, I didn't know it was going to be today, but certainly happy to continue the discussion. I think he's understandably tired of talking to me and wants to know how we might resolve the matter, but there are some more matters to be worked out in order to do that, and we'll do whatever we can to make that happen.
Okay.
You know, the only objection I got on my petition I could see from reading what I received was they may want to, city may want to retain part of this for beautification project. Well, that's fine. I don't have no problem with that. I'll work out with you. We've been maintaining it. We've mowed the yard. You took the whole concrete out, everything. The street is closed. Curb and guttering's all the way around what I had access to. I mean, to me, it's a pretty simple issue, but I don't know.
Okay.
Was this
Frustrating to me because it's been on for 6, 7 months.
was this part of our Broadway corridor?
Yeah.
Yes, it's a part of, if you, I realize you don't have anything before you, but
Right.
if you can envision at all the intersection that Mr. Minimum speaks of, the intersection of Grand and 13th, it's a residential property that faces 13th is the property that Mr. Minimum has, and the consequence of, as you might be aware, as they did that work along Broadway, it was to eliminate those odd angles as those
Right.
as those north-south streets intersected with Broadway, and as they changed that radius so that it would be a perpendicular intersection, it affected and extended, if you will, altered how Grand is aligned with that intersection, and left right-of-way between the modified Grand and Mr. Miniman's property. It is that area that the petition initially sought vacation of that right-of-way. Well, there's utility complications as well as the commission's expressed understandable
Sure.
interest in
Which I remember that meeting.
preserving the ability to potentially do some landscaping enhancements along there and that sort of thing.
Well, yeah, no, I think
I
we
kind of remember it
understand.
now,
That's-
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I kinda
and
remember.
in past past the public comment period that we're in, we can't take any action on this item today because it's not part of our published agenda, and our legal staff, city staff is still working on it. But I want them to get together with you, even if you're exacerbated with your contact with Mr. Bingston, before you go out of town.
I'm not exacerbated, I'm just, him and I are on the same wavelength, it's just a matter of moving on it, that's all I can see.
Yeah.
I still
And
had a
so
question on.
If that meeting can happen, then, before you leave, I just want to make sure that you know how to contact each other, and that you can have that meeting before you have to be back out of town, and that might make follow-up contact by phone easier to get it resolved.
I guess my situation was is that I assumed I was going to get a notice when there was going to be a hearing before the board.
And you would, if
get-
it reaches that stage, if a hearing
I
is...
didn't get on my original petition. If there was going to be an objection to it, I thought, well, I'd get notice, and I'd come in, and I can tell you, and I didn't get the notice, and the next thing I know is that your petition's been rejected, so I contacted Mr. Bankston to try to work something out. He understands the legal issues just as much as I do.
Was the property in question, did we acquire that during this process? Was this already land we owned, or did we do eminent domain on this, or?
It was pre-existing right-of-way that was affected by the realignment.
So it's right-of-way that, again, our citizens are generally, they need to maintain, but again, we retain this right-of-way. So basically, I just want to be clear from my own mind, you're wanting us to give you back the right-of-way that we already had as a city. And I think, is this the basis for the, I remember we had the meeting where we said, we want to retain those for beautification or other reasons. We didn't see at this point the need to I mean, it's right-of-way. It's not like you could build anything back on there anyway, correct? In that area?
When you say you couldn't build anything on it, are you referring to the,
His desire to put a road or access back onto that, would that even be possible for him to even put that road back? I'm not encouraging that. I mean, my position is the city has this property, and our denial is that we have expressed to you our wish to maintain that property for beautification or other reasons. I just don't want him to get the false sense that you aren't doing our bidding. I mean, I think we pretty well made it expressly clear to you that we wanted to retain those properties. So I just want you to be clear that his denial is probably as a result. I'm assuming that we told you that's not, we didn't want those pieces being turned back over.
that was the action taken, and
What was?
well, when the initial public hearing on the vacation request, I think is what Commissioner Householder is referring to. I can't recall the circumstance. I was not here that day, I don't
Here was the
believe.
city of Salina, regular request for city commission action, and the only thing I could get out of this, they says recommended action based on the objections received from public and franchise utilities, which they don't own the property, I do. If they might have an easement, but I own the property to the middle of the street, which I received the argument, oh, no, you don't. Yes, I do. I own the property to the middle of Grand Avenue, and I own the property to the middle of 13th Street.
And Mr. Miniman and I disagree on that point.
Well, I know, because whether it's a dedicated plat or a common law plat, I own the middle of the streets. You got a right of way.
We've talked about that for longer than I'd like to think about, and we disagree.
There's nothing to disagree about. I showed you what the law was.
I'm sorry, Mr. Miniman, you and I disagree on that point.
Well, anyway, we agreed that you didn't file proceedings to take and condemn my property.
That is correct.
Access, and you build a driveway for the people across the street from you.
There was an existing driveway that was replaced, yes.
Did you give him that little triangle?
I don't believe so, no.
How come? You build him a driveway across the property, across the street from me, and didn't give him the property. What the city's done, the state of Illinois, or state of Kansas, deeded all these properties along Broadway, which is the old US 8140, and consolidated all these little bits of property and vacated what the government bought way back in the 30s. There's little pieces of property along the edge, as I recall. I think there's a deed to that effect. There's all kinds of deeds that are recorded on the property along Broadway, and then you guys, or the city, whatever, I keep saying you guys, the commission or whoever, decided to take and make right angles along Broadway and closed off Grand Avenue where I'm at, and you closed off 13th Street where the business across the street's from, and built, changed the direction of Grand Avenue through this little triangle. And I filed a petition to vacate the street. You vacated it. He's trying to say you didn't vacate. I differ with somebody. If you want to go out there and show me the street where you dig up the concrete, you put a new curb and guttering all the way around the property.
Mr. Bankston, does Mr. Miniman have an avenue for appeal of that decision if he doesn't agree with the action taken by the commission?
Yes, he
Instead of
does.
arguing about it.
Right. I was just trying to be more clear. I mean, I just want to make sure.
I should say he did, and in terms of the timing and as to whether there was a notice question, am I correct, Mr. Minimum, that the problem, am I correct that as we look back, the notice was given to your brother who resides at the property and not you personally? Was that the
I don't know whether he got
situation?
notice or not, but he could have. I'm not saying he didn't.
Yeah, I'm not arguing the point. I was
I'm
just
not-
responding
not
to
gonna-
Commissioner Angel's
Yeah, no.
question, but
I guess I was under the impression there was no notice. Commissioners, as you know, we're not going to be able to negotiate this
Sure.
today, and certainly if possible for Mr. Miniman and Mr. Banks to get together to have any other conversations. There may be agreement, there may not be. It appears that we owe you a legal update, give you some information to be able to take that in and understand the full issue. Certainly we'll try to get that to you and move that issue forward in front of you. so
That
you
was
know
my
what's-
request of
Yeah.
about 7 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, so I was just trying to get my head around.
Cannot be resolved today, but we
Sure.
wanted to hear the comment, and if there was still the desire for Mr. Minimum to get together with Mr. Bingston to know where things are at, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, in his opinion. I wanted that meeting to happen so that he knows how to proceed and we know how to proceed, and as a commission, we can get an update on that.
Sounds
Yeah.
good. We'll do that for you.
And again, my whole point was merely to reflect, or deflect, as it may be, that away from, he's purely giving you the legal advice. We gave him direction that we didn't want that land turned back over to the property owners. So if there's a gripe or complaint, I would say that it falls on us for our desire to keep it. He's merely giving you our legal position on what we wanted. I assume that's sort of the best way to describe it.
yeah, I'll try to make this short, if I may. The discussion that Mr. Miniman and I had around Thanksgiving time that he speaks of is certainly left me with a matter to go forward with and to review with staff and ultimately respond to Mr. Miniman. I had not had opportunity to do that, frankly, with everything else that has gone on in the meantime, that I wouldn't expect Mr. Minimum to necessarily have any reason to be aware of. When he wrote me, and I think that came last week, and indicated that he was going to be here toward the end of the month, I thought, great, chance to deal with it face to face, and we would do the staff work necessary to respond appropriately. As I say, and Mr. Minimum doesn't have to tell me where he is day by day, but I did not realize that he was going to be here today, and I applaud you for being able to travel these under these circumstances. But there is analysis and work and a response due to Mr. Miniman, and that was certainly the plan, to try to be in the best position I could to speak with him when he came to Salina, and I'm glad to see him, and that we'll certainly try to take it to the next step as quickly as we can.
So what's the final say-so here? What do you
I'm sorry?
What's the final say-so here?
The two of you are going to get in contact with each other. Mr. Bingston just said that based on your meeting in November, he had things to respond to you with on this matter.
Okay.
And he's ready to talk with you, so then that response can get to you.
What kind of time frame we talking about?
Well, I
I can
think,
stay around till tomorrow if you want to be around.
well, it will certainly be at least
I
tomorrow.
don't want to, but I will. I do have things I need to do. Still trying to resolve this in an amicable and straightforward matter, as you well know.
Certainly, as am I. And, we can do what we can do in that period of time, but
Sure.
it may not be fully resolved. I'll do whatever we can to try to advance the question.
If we could meet and come to some consensus for you to present to the panel here, looking forward to that.
I'm sorry?
I said, if we meet and come to some consensus that you could present to the panel, we can do that.
We can certainly discuss that.
Don't talk like a lawyer.
That's what he is, though, sir.
I've been listening to you talk like,
Yeah, you two will get in contact with each other tomorrow. If the legal things that Mr. Bingston needs to present to you can't be compiled by tomorrow, then I'm assuming you'll be able to follow up with each other over the telephone. And if it's not satisfactory to you, Mr. Minimum, then you always have, that was Commissioner Angel's question, if there's a right of appeal. So get a hold of Mr. Bingston, or Mr. Bingston get a hold of you, and I can wait for you to exchange phone numbers if it needs to happen that way. But if you're still going to be in town, do it face-to-face. If you're not, do it over the telephone and move the matter along.
Okay?
certainly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll move into awards and proclamations.
Item 4.1, presentation of plaques of appreciation to outgoing employee council members. Will Randy Rapp, Darren Steinman, and Tori Stuckey please come forward?
We're going to give you the opportunity to speak first, Mr. Simon, if you want. But thank you and congratulations.
All right, give us each.
You had your opportunity.
Just briefly, I'd like to say that it was such an honor working with Mr. Gage and Natalie. It was really a pleasure, and I learned a lot and thoroughly enjoyed it.
Are you going to be spoken? Thanks to the three of you. Thank you.
Did you guys get your pictures? Are we having cake or anything? Because I haven't had lunch, I'm just asking.
And that moves us into public hearings, an item scheduled for a certain time.
Item 5.1, public hearing on amended petition number 4348 to allow a break-in access to be shifted 50 feet to the east on Magnolia Road. Sub-item 5.1A, first reading of amended ordinance number 12-10,646.
We have both Mr. Andrew and Mr. Stack listed. So, gentlemen, please give us a staff report.
I have a report for you, Mayor and Commissioners. The petitioners on this item are located in the city of Wichita, and they endeavored to get here today, but turned around and drove back, and then asked if this item, the public hearing on this item, could be continued to your next meeting on March the 4th. So the appropriate thing to do would be to see if there's anyone present here who would like to comment on this item at this hearing. But our recommendation would be to allow the petitioner to be present and make their presentation, and to continue this item to your March 4th meeting.
Okay. Do we have anybody from the public that wishes to comment on this item today that would not be able to return at the meeting on the 14th? Okay, seeing none, we wouldn't need a motion just to hold the public hearing open, but we'd need a motion to reschedule.
Yes, I would both open the public hearing and move to,
Okay. And what was the date that then we would reschedule?
I'll look to Mr. Andrew to be sure I'm understanding
I
correctly.
believe that March 4th is your next
March
meeting
4th.
on
Okay.
the following Monday, and that's what they requested, to be able to move that 1 week.
Okay, thank you.
Am I correct? Are we of the same mind that we should open the public hearing and continue, or were you thinking
Yeah,
just strictly a postponement?
I think it should be opened and continued.
Okay. Well, we'll open the public hearing on this matter now, and we have no public comment at this point in time, so we could entertain a motion to continue the public hearing on March 4th.
Mayor, I move at this time we postpone ordinance, the decision on ordinance number 12-10646 until our March, we say 4th meeting.
Yes.
Second.
Motion and a second to continue the public hearing on this matter until March the 4th. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carried 5-0. We now move into the consent agenda.
Item 6.1, approve the minutes of February 11th, 2013. Item 6.2, authorize the replacement of one booster pump at the Indiana Booster Station, project number 132968, by Land Christensen Company in the amount of $20,741.80. Item 6.3, award of contract for the K-143 Highway Utility Relocation Project number 132950 to Larson Construction Incorporated in the amount of $55,970. Item 6.4, award of contract for the 2013 microsurfacing project number 132952 to Missouri Pavement Maintenance in the amount of $688,101.65 with a 5% construction contingency in the amount of $34,405.08. Item 6.5, resolution number 136985, authorizing agreement and consent to assignment with Aquaterra Environmental Solutions Incorporated to provide professional engineering services for the Salina Municipal Solid Waste Landfill Facility. Item 6.6, resolution number 136971, authorizing a professional services contract for physician services as the fire department's medical director. Item 6.7, resolution number 136984, authorizing a First Amendment to the Kenwood Cove concessions agreement with Hungry Cats Incorporated.
Are there any items that a commissioner wishes to be pulled from the agenda?
I don't have anything that I wanted to pull, but I would like to comment on 6.6, resolution number 136971. I just wanted to say that my husband was brought into the ER on Friday night, and I just appreciate the expediency with which his problem was handled. He's still there, but I appreciated Dr. K and his did a very good job. I couldn't pronounce his name, but he was very good. Thank you.
Yeah. It's the same doctor that was there for Mom last week when she went into the ER. So 2 out of 5 on the panel have some accolades to share about Salina Regional.
You're making our medical director nervous because of all your HIPAA violations.
Alleged. Are there any other comments or questions on agenda items? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the consent agenda is read. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carried 5-0. We move to development business.
Item 7.1, first reading ordinance number 1010680, amending the future land use map of the comprehensive plan to change the future land use designation of a portion of Yost Addition.
Mr. Andrew?
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. These are two companion items, the first item of which deals with the future land use map and the comprehensive plan. And as you are aware, the comprehensive plan, our current version, was adopted by the Planning Commission and City Commission in 2010. And one of the important parts of that is that it does delineate future growth areas for new development. And this map that is depicted on the screen for you defines what is identified as the city's urban service area, and that includes both the existing city and areas that the city anticipates potentially growing out into. It should also be recognized that the planning horizon for the comprehensive plan is 20 to 30 years, and in some aspects of it up to 50 years. So the fact that you have the growth area there doesn't mean that it's something that is going to occur immediately. This particular map that we have displayed here is the future land use map, and it serves as a general guide to future land uses within the urban service area. And so the area that we're discussing is right down here at Waterwell Road and I-135, with this being Waterwell, I-135, and South 9th Street, and then Centennial Road right there, and you can see West Dry Creek going through the property. We also have another map, and that map identifies certain economic development hubs within the community. And what you can see here is that these are identified activity centers for employment within the community, both retail and in the manufacturing sector. And you can see an area concentration north of the downtown area, referred to as North Downtown West and North Downtown East. You have the airport employment area, and then there's a hub on South 9th Street that has an industrial component, and then this red is retail. And again, we are focusing on an area that shows on the future land use map, a portion of which is shown as commercial, and on the employment hub map or economic development hub map, it shows the area west of I-135 as part of the airport employment area. I have one other map I'd like to put up that's somewhat similar to this, but John, if you could go to the map that shows our current industrial zoned areas, and you'll see a similar pattern where much of our industrial land is in the downtown, North Downtown East and North Downtown West areas. And then if you could scroll that, John, you will see that there's another industrial concentration out in the Airport Industrial Center, and also property in the South Industrial area. And the area we're focused on, again, is right here. The future land use map and the comprehensive plan give some guidance on making amendments to the land use map, but as a general rule, the guidance is that a change for a zoning designation should be consistent with the future land use map, but the plan recognizes that there may be circumstances where land use and development goals have changed, and it may be appropriate for amendments to the land use map to occur to accommodate development that furthers the plan vision or other goals of the comprehensive plan. And so what we've laid out for you there is we have a commercial land use category, which is primarily there to accommodate retail service, businesses, office, and civic and institutional uses. And you'll see that primarily concentrated along the South 9th Street corridor. There's also an employment area land use category, and within that category you'll see light industrial warehouse uses, and you'll see potential zoning districts that are primarily industrial. And so we also have some language in the plan that says that Salina should continue to build on the synergy in the Airport Industrial Center by encouraging employment and transportation uses to locate in the airport area. And the comprehensive plan is based on the Kansas Planning, Zoning, Enabling Act, which sets up this process for amending the comprehensive plan. It starts with a hearing before the City Planning Commission and their recommendation to you about whether a plan amendment is justified. And on page 4 of the report, identify some factors there to consider on any change to the comprehensive plan. As far as the origin of this, I can tell you that before the Waterwell I-135 interchange was funded and built, this particular area was shown in the 1990s as future industrial as part of the airport and south industrial area. That changed in 2002 when the interchange was built and there was a proposal for the Yost Addition subdivision, and the decision was made that this was a potentially prime interchange location that could support additional commercial development. And so this property that you see in pink there was zoned C7 highway commercial, and when the comprehensive plan map was created in 2010, it showed the area east of Dry Creek as future commercial. The applicant, in this case, the Yost Trust, has filed this request to amend the land use designation, partially because no development has occurred on any of the C7 zone lots since the property was platted and zoned in 2002, and also the fact that there would still be approximately 30 acres of C7 zone property available if their rezoning request is approved. So the purpose of this item here is to have you look at what you see as the vision for future development of this area. Do you see it as being more closely tied to the South 9th Street commercial corridor, which would lend towards the C7 and highway commercial zoning because of the interchange, or do you see it more closely related to the airport industrial area because it is west of the interstate and ties back to Centennial Road? The Planning Commission did not entertain this application lightly. They had much discussion about this at their January 15th meeting, and they were unable to reach a consensus, and so they voted to continue the hearing to February 5th, and they requested staff provide them with some additional information and options. At the conclusion of that hearing, they voted to recommend that this map that you see on the screen be amended to show this area right here as a continuation of the purple or employment area as opposed to the current pink, which is commercial area. And so this alternative would maintain the current Plan C7 zoning on those lots except for the one that's the subject of our next item, but does send an indication that you would be receptive and the Planning Commission would be receptive to other types of future industrial development east of Dry Creek. And so the basis for their decision is that this is a transition area that is west of I-135. It is outside the South 9th Street Commercial Corridor and Overlay District. It is west of I-135 and is shown as part of the airport area economic hub, as you saw on the other map, and that it is a second-tier interchange location, and that the presence of the KDOT maintenance facility has already influenced this area. I have a couple other maps I wanted to put up. John, if you could put up the South 9th Corridor Overlay District. There is a corridor overlay district that has been adopted by both the city and Salina County, and you can see that it deals with development that fronts on 9th Street and even extends south of Waterwell Road, but we're over here in the Yost Addition, so you can see that this site here is outside of what's been identified as the South 9th Street corridor, but it's zoned commercially because it's tied in with this interchange. The other two maps I wanted to show you, John, if you could go to West Crawford and I-135. This is the zoning pattern, and just to get your bearings here, this is Interstate 135, this is Crawford Street. These brown areas are Zone C7 highway commercial, right adjacent to the interchange, and then as you move away, you have actually some existing truck terminals up here, the Blue Beacon facilities here, Ryder Truck Rental up here, but the pattern is to have C7 right at the interchange and I-2 back away. And then, John, if you could go to North 9th and I-70. This is the interchange at I-70 and North 9th. This is the Petro 2 complex, and Monarch Road is up here at the top, and this area here adjacent to the west is zoned I-2 with C7 here, and then this is Grain Belt Supply here. So you've got a convenience store, travel plaza, a McDonald's, a motel, and then on the second tier properties you have industrial. So that is the pattern at those two locations, and the question before you today and the question before the Planning Commission was, should the area west of I-135 and east of Dry Creek be designated for a future land use that would support industrial-related, transport-related, warehouse-related activities as opposed to highway commercial. And so with that, I'd be open to any questions about any of the maps we've showed you or the information on this item. But I do believe that the Planning Commission deliberated over this very seriously, and they reached their conclusion after much discussion and deliberation, and not something that anyone took lightly.
You summarize their conclusion?
Their conclusion, again, was that the entire area there, which is currently shown as brown, should be designated as the purple employment area, as all the rest of the area west of the interstate is, and that that changes the land use plan but leaves the remainder intact. So what we have is this pink represents the 9th Street commercial corridor. There's a finger that comes over here that's shown that way because of the present C7 zoning, and basically they recommended that that area go from the pink commercial to the purple employment area, which means that it would be supportive in the right circumstances of future proposals for industrial type development.
Any questions of staff?
Well, just to recap, basically all our interstate exits have the 7 zoning for, and I assume that's gas stations, restaurants, whatever else.
It was something that it was done back in 1990, but it was something that the Planning Commission and City Commission at the time seized on. They thought it was important that areas next to the interchange locations be set aside for uses that would pull or serve travelers coming off the interstate, that you didn't want to occupy those prime locations with uses that weren't interstate oriented or didn't need the interstate access. So at North Ohio and I-70 there's C7 zoning. At North 9th and I-70 there's C7 zoning. There are some out at West Crawford. The area at Schilling and I-135 where the Hampton Inn and the Courtyard by Marriott and the restaurants are, that is zoned C7. And so when the Yost addition was platted and zoned in 2002, it was also zoned C7.
Yeah.
However, the difference is you can see the activity at Schilling and I-135, and there's been little or no activity at I-135 and Waterwell except for the Sleep Inn, which is not right at the interchange.
Sure, sure. I mean, just to me would seem, well, maybe I'll save it till the comment section. I guess that's all the questions I have, yeah.
Did I understand you to say the area we're looking at here is the second tier, similar to what we see at Crawford and I-135 and
Yeah, John, if you could go to maybe the Yoast, the colored layout, and we could
It's set a little bit further back.
What we are looking at in terms of the application, that's the actual zoning change, the next item before you is right here. So this is a almost 20-acre lot, and they're taking the south 8.77 acres, which leaves the remaining 11+ acres here that is still available for highway commercial development, but they're requesting that the zoning designation be changed here. When the Planning Commission looked at it, they tried to look at it more from a big picture approach, so that it didn't, every time this came up, we weren't having the same discussion. So they looked at it from the whole point of view, and they said it may or may not happen. It's not going to change the C7 zoning, but they saw that this could be envisioned as part of the employment area, which this property up here that's owned by Doug Bradley is shown as employment area. This property over here that's owned by Doug Bradley is shown as employment area. And they just said, well, this is a line here, and that we could see everything west being more closely tied with the airport than with South 9th Street.
Makes it more uniform on that,
Right.
on the map.
And where is the KDOT facility?
KDOT facility sits right here at the end of the cul-de-sac.
Right.
And I would note that although we do have a zoning designation and such on the property, KDOT is actually immune from most city regulations, so they don't need to obtain permits for what they do there. And
There you go.
They have some limited immunity from zoning, but the portion that we're calling a second-tier location is here.
Sure.
This is KDOT, and then this is the remainder of Lot 1, which is not part of the next request.
Any other questions of staff?
Mayor, may I ask a couple quick questions?
Please.
Thank you. Dean, a couple things, just want to see if the Planning Commission contemplated. One, even though the zoning of the KDOT property is now shown as I-2, we didn't have the current public zoning at that time, I don't believe. So if they were, which they're not, but if they were subject to zoning today and we were going to zone their property, wouldn't we be considering that as a public zone?
We would probably call that a public use
Okay. Did the
district.
Planning Commission contemplate that?
They did, and actually, John, if you go back to the plan, that it's very hard to pick up the shades and gradations on the future land use plan, but the future land use plan, this is actually blue, and so the KDOT facility is shown as public use, not industrial or employment area.
Okay.
They did take note of the fact that in 2002, the KDOT property was shown as future industrial because we didn't have the public use designation, and then on the comprehensive plan that was done in 2010, it is shown as a public use site.
And I assume that though the KDOT facility was there first, it wasn't the Planning Commission's intent to use that as the dominant use for the rest of the area. In other words, make it all public use. That wouldn't make any sense.
No.
My other question is one of our concerns with regards to our goals for Salina for some time, including the current comprehensive plan, are the entryways and gateways. And we have a lot of those that do have industrial I-1, I-2 type uses adjacent or near there, and there always has been some concern about the aesthetics of those entryways and gateways. And so I guess my question is, did the Planning Commission contemplate a PDD to satisfy the industrial need there in order to also preserve the look of the entryway and gateway versus an I-2?
It was one of the options. The option that they chose or put their faith in, would be a better way to put it, is the option of using deed covenants to address the development standards, which is an approach that the Salina Economic Development Corporation and Airport Authority have used. So, for example, Salina Vortex has landscaping and they have paved parking and access drives. They don't have that because the I-3 zoning requires it. They have it because the Airport Authority required that as part of a deed covenant on the site. So
the Airport Authority would have standing to enforce that if they needed to?
Correct.
Who would have authority to enforce those types of covenants at this property?
The way it is set up now, it would be the Yost Trust, the owner-developer of the property would have to put a deed covenant on the property saying that it had to be developed to that standard.
Could
So
they
we wouldn't have
assign
any
the right to
standing.
us?
That would be a question for Mr. Bankston. It's not been the custom to have private covenants enforced through zoning, but the planned development district is the option that gives the city the enforcement authority. The covenants, there's an option that gives the private enforcement authority. But we have, for better or worse, the covenants in the airport area have worked in terms of the airport authority ensuring that the development out there met their standard and exceeded the city's standard.
What's the vehicle that can be used on this outside of, that to me almost sounds like just trust and hope. I'm thinking of Ohio and Pacific, and for quite a while we had somebody that wasn't a good community partner, and that was a really eyesore as far as the galvanizing plant. Now we have a wonderful company that has redone landscaping, repainted the building, and has made it a good look. So my concern for this area would be not to have another rundown place seen off the highway. So what's the best vehicle that the commission can use in order to put those covenants in? Is that what's being proposed, or is there another?
In terms of the general question that Mr. Gage posed, there's what we use on the other side, on the 9th Street corridor, is a overlay district which has requirements over and above the base district. An overlay district, as we pointed out, extends on the east side of the interstate, not on this side. But the tools that are available for ensuring that even industrial uses that are in gateway locations have those amenities would be a planned development district, or to adopt some sort of overlay district for all the gateway locations. I said both the Salina Economic Development Corporation and the Airport Authority regularly use covenants in the deeds that they convey the sites to out there, saying that they have to develop them according to a standard that has paved parking and front yard landscaping. Those covenants are over and above what the city zoning requires. And in this case, the Planning Commission put their faith in the covenants that the Yost Trust would have in place for the applicant to have paved parking and front yard landscaping along Yost Drive.
Okay, so are those the teeth that are needed to ensure that the development happens the way that is desired?
I believe I'm correct, Mr. Andrew, am I not, that we are actually, as the city, as the public entity, is precluded as a matter of Kansas law from seeking to enforce private covenants?
I believe that starts to venture into the
Mm-hmm.
area of contract zoning, which is not permissible under Kansas law. We have used covenants through the platting process or the subdivision process, but we're not dealing with a new subdivision here. We're dealing with a requested zoning change. So I tried not to blend the two requests together, but what we pointed out in the zoning report is that if you rely on the covenants, you're relying on private enforcement. If you want to have public enforcement, then the planned development district is the mechanism by which the public bodies could make sure that those things occurred.
Or we deed this little section over to the airport authority and let them do it.
And the airport authority is in the unique position of being in all of those cases, am I correct, Dean, that is the case where they are the owner and transferor of title
Right.
at the time
Right.
that the covenants are put in place.
So what I
Presumably have an enduring interest in the matter.
In some ways, the Airport Authority Board serves a similar function to an architectural or design review committee in a residential subdivision. The Airport Authority Board reviews and approves all the plans for development on their parcel there and uses that to enforce the development standards. In this case, it would be the Yost Trust serving as that review board unless you chose the Planned Development District option, in which case the city would be the enforcement arm.
And that's a matter of what needs to be determined in 7.1.
Yeah, Commissioners, obviously, it depends on what your priority is for that development site, but if it's aesthetics long-term, then that would be something to talk about.
And correct me if I'm wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but that would actually be associated with item 7.2. 7.1 will decide your future land use first, and then you
That's
can
what
impose that.
I felt we'd kind of
Okay.
ventured into that might not need to be taken care of in 7.1.
7.1 is what the long-range vision is for this area west of the interstate, and 7.2 gets into the specifics of a specific development proposal.
Any other questions of staff? Thank you, Mr. Andrew. Do we have any public comment on this? Sir, if you could state your name and address for us.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, Jeff Mace, Compro Realty, 157 South 7th. One of the things that happened during the Planning Commission was some of what we saw go on here, combining the two requests, and I think, Mr. Mayor, your question about 7.1 or 7.2 as it relates to zoning control is coming, and really what happened in the Planning Commission, in my judgment, and I think it was even stated by the planning commissioners, was that they did get the two items confused and they ran together, and so they were unable to get past the amendment of the land use question. Relative information, as far as we're concerned, as the applicant in that, to that end, is one big piece is that we're not, by amending the land use map, or by amending the comp plan and the land use making an employment area, the Planning Commission and this body would not be giving up anything in doing so, because PC 7 is still allowable, and that with that designation. It's necessary to amend it because I-2 is not. So control, as you think about it, as your body, you're not giving anything up in our judgment. One of the important things, this property, as he mentioned, has been on the market for a long time. We've marketed it a great deal, and we have very little, if none, interest in it from a retail standpoint. There's been no users that are interested. They're, critical mass to the west, and we can go through all of those type arguments. But the Yost Trust looked at it when they zoned it PC7 in hopes that it would be truck stop and that type of activity. We contend and believe today that just because we do this, it doesn't deter future PC7 users. It may not be high-impact retail, but it could be PC7 users similar to what we see. And what I envision when I look at this location, given its proximity to the industrial area and the airport is users like we see coming north out of Wichita, the Kansas Golf folks, Murphy Tractor. One of the people that we were really excited about getting in this location and putting on the very corner was Carico, the John Deere dealer that ended in Ellsworth. So I think one of the things, if people start thinking, well, if it's not, if we do this and it's not, they're thinking in terms of high impact retail, I think it'd be wonderful to see Carico's application right there with John Deere, and very appropriate for our trade area. So I guess what I would ask first, and we've got a lot to comment on relative to some of the other concerns, but just from 7.1, we thought it made the most sense to amend the map now rather than just the 8.7 acres that's being requested, but to do the entire Yost addition into employment area to allow the flexibility in the future. Any questions?
Excellent. Thank you, sir. Do we have any other public comment? Okay, I'll bring it back to the commission for discussion and any action. I see when I look at it, you know, it's kind of easy to think of the area from some of the aerials that we looked at there, and there is a lot of distinction west of I-135, and it does feel more of a connection with the airport, as well as even some of the industrial area on the east side of I-135. So a move to employment after hearing this and going to it seems like a pretty sound thought.
I agree with that, Mayor, and I move to approve ordinance 13-10680 on first reading.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 13-10680 on first reading. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? That motion carried 5-0.
Item 7.2, application number Z12-25, requesting a change in zoning district classification from PC7 to I2 in order to allow the construction of a truck terminal on the east side of Yost Drive. Sub-item 7.2A, first reading ordinance number 10,681.
Mr. Ander.
Now, this item focuses on a specific development proposal and the zoning of one particular portion of a parcel. If we go back to the original conception of the Yost addition, which is shown there on the screen, it comprises 133 acres. The original zoning was Plan C7 up near the interchange. There's an I-2 piece west of the creek, and then the zoning for the KDOT facility was I-3. We had a partnership here between a northern parcel owned by the Yost Trust and a southern parcel owned by KDOT. And what occurred was the water line went down the center of Waterwell Road and was hung from the bridge. KDOT said if they did an interchange there that it had to be relocated. And so what happened was the Waterwell water line was diverted down 9th Street, sent straight under the interstate outside the area of the interchange, back up Yost Drive, and continues out west towards the landfill. What that did was, of course, it brought water to here, which resulted in the construction of the sleep-in motel here, but it made fire protection and water available for the KDOT facility and for all the lots on Yost Drive. So one of the things about the Yost addition is it does have paved street, operational water, and an operational sewer system that is ready to go. What it doesn't have is any development, except for the KDOT facility. And so back in 2002, the designation was Plan C7, which meant that a final site plan for each development would come back before the Planning Commission before a building permit was issued. Nothing in that regard has occurred, as no development has been put forward. And so the application that you have in front of you today is the Old Dominion Freight Line has a contract to purchase the south 8.77 acres of this tract here from the Yost Trust. And they are proposing to construct a cross-dock truck terminal at that location. And the contract is contingent on rezoning the property to an appropriate zoning classification for truck terminals. And we went through in our report that we determined that a truck terminal is an industrial use, and the most straightforward approach would be to seek zoning approval for that use by requesting a zoning map change to I-2. So the request before you is to go from Plan C7 to I-2 just on the south 8.77 acres. So the what Mr. Mays, the point he was trying to make is that if the zoning gets changed here, it's still going to be Plan C7 on the remainder, and if anybody wanted to do anything different, they would still be coming before the Planning Commission and City Commission to do that different than Plan C7 uses. Well, I think if you go to page 6 of your report there, I think that's where the crux of the matter is, and that is the fact that it's not so much the use, it is the development standards that are different between I-2 light industrial and C7 highway commercial, whereas paid parking and front yard landscaping are mandatory in the C7 district. They are voluntary in the I-2 district. And we don't have a planned industrial district comparable to the planned commercial district. So if this were rezoned to I-2 as requested, the Commission would not be reviewing or approving a site plan or attaching conditions of approval. One, as we pointed out, one way that's been dealt with in other situations is deed covenants between seller and buyer in industrial areas. And I'll just give you an example in a residential setting. If a developer has a square footage requirement that says they will not allow homes under 15 square feet in their subdivision, and somebody applies for a building permit to build a 1,200 square foot home that meets all zoning requirements, we will issue the permit, and it's up to the developer or the architectural review committee to ensure that that is not constructed. And so that, when you are relying on private deed covenants, you are relying on the private party, and the city is not a party to enforce them. And so the origin of this is that the applicant, based on 10 years of no interest, believes that the current Plan C7 zoning, at least on this south portion, inhibits the marketability and future development of the property. As you know, there's no commercial development on the site, only the KDOT maintenance facility. And the belief at the time was that a full interchange there would enhance accessibility and commercial development potential, and at least over a 10-year period it has not occurred. The concern is that the applicant is requesting I-2 zoning on a lot that abuts I-135, and so while not on the interchange, it does back up to the interstate. As far as utilities, as I indicated, the water, sewer, and paved street are all in place. As far as the drainage, there was not a specific plan for this east parcel, but there are inlets and tubes that carry runoff from the south end of this cul-de-sac over to a detention area and the creek, and that is likely to be the solution for the potential truck terminal site. Yost Drive is a public street. It has 60 feet of right-of-way and 33 feet of paving, which is adequate to support truck traffic. There would actually be less truck traffic with a truck terminal than you'd have if a truck stop or travel plaza were located on the same property. The other thing that we would point out is that when the water well interchange was funded, one of the justifications was that it provided better truck access and a truck route into the airport industrial area and the south industrial area than Schilling Road, because the trucks did not have to compete with the commercial traffic like they would at Schilling Road. So one of the reasons that KDOT did fund the interchange was to encourage that as a place for truck traffic to use. But the question for you today is whether you view this south 8.77 acres here as a prime location for businesses catering to interstate travelers, or you see it as a second tier or secondary location. We showed you the maps for the other interchanges, particularly North 9th and I-70 and Crawford and I-135, where you've got commercial right at the interchange and then some I-2 in behind. But as we mentioned, and we mention again on page 9, the primary concern about I-2 zoning is the development standards. And the current Plan C7 zoning requires paved parking, access drives, a landscape plan, and submittal of plans that are binding on the applicant. The I-2 zoning doesn't require those. I believe that the Planning Commission understood that distinction, but they seem satisfied by the indication by the applicant that they would have deed covenants with the buyer that would address the front yard landscaping and pavement. So based on that, the Planning Commission recommended approval of a zoning change from Plan C7 to I-2, and the reasons they provided are on page 9 of your report. Part of that weakness, again, is the development standards that we have for the I-2 area. There's been little interest over the years in strengthening those, but I can tell you that the Planning Commission has indicated support for recommending a elimination of the paving loophole for I-2 and I-3 and having a paving requirement across the board. So that would change that standard, but as far as some of the other things such as outdoor storage or landscaping, those are best addressed either through an overlay district or some form of plan district like a plan development district. So the options that we have identified to you as to zoning, as you've already indicated you were supportive of this as a future employment area, then if you would concur with the Planning Commission's recommendation, the attached ordinance which rezones this property to I-2 light industrial and relies on deed covenants for the paving and landscaping aspect should be approved on first reading. If you are in agreement with the findings but you're concerned about the lesser I-2 development standards, then you could approve a lesser change from Plan C7 to a Plan Development District. What that would do is require the development of the south 8.77 acres to conform to an approved site plan and have paved parking and front yard landscaping. It would also not allow the uses to be modified to anything that wasn't a truck terminal without an amendment. To exercise this option, this would require staff to go in and modify the ordinance that is before you. If you just disagree with the recommendation of the Planning Commission, you could return this zoning application to them and give the reasons for your disagreement. Or if you have 4 votes in support of outright denial, then a motion could be made to deny this, and if 4 votes were in support of that action, it would be denied. But with that, I'd be happy to address any specific questions about the report or about I-2 development standards.
Questions of staff? Mr. Andrew, if it is an I-2 and it is built voluntarily at a higher standard, landscaping, paving, but then it changes hands and it still remains in an I-2, then would a new owner be required to keep up the aesthetics of the landscaping that was done in the beginning? And
well, the covenants that I've reviewed for the Airport Authority and the Salina Economic Development Corporation are covenants that run with the land, so they are binding on the purchaser and they are binding on subsequent purchasers.
Okay.
And we would want to ensure that that was the case, but in covenants or no covenants, you could always have a situation where you have a different user or different owner who has a lower standard of care than the previous one.
Because they're private. And then is this land being purchased from the Yost Trust for this use if it happens in 7-2 by Old Dominion?
Yes, it would be the 8.77 acres. There would be a lot split and a deed created that this would go under the ownership from transfer from Yost Trust to Old Dominion.
Okay. Yeah, I think that was answered my questions. Other questions of staff?
From looking at the findings of the Planning Commission and the ordinance, it doesn't look like anything was even said about one of the reasons or one of their justifications was inclusion of the covenants in the deed. So it would seem we don't even have a fail-safe to ensure the covenants are in the deed, let alone once they're in the deed, enforce them.
Mm-hmm.
I would call that the faith and trust approach, that staff will work with the Yost Trust, and that we will review the deed covenants, and we will make sure that they are done that way, again, realizing that we're not an enforcement party.
If they even follow through and put the covenants in the deed. Because there's no requirement in the ordinance that the covenants
Exist.
exist. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
again,
Because
part of
there's
that
no
is the fact
enforceability.
that the city is not an enforcement party
Right.
to them.
Yeah, and Commissioners, what might be important to them may not be important to us, and vice versa within those covenants.
Right. Any other questions of staff?
Mayor, if I may, maybe this need not be stated, but is everyone of the understanding that there is no obligation on the part of the private party to even enforce the covenants, should they be in
Right.
place?
Yep.
If that's clear to everyone.
Yeah. I think that's a concern. I think I mean, you guys are being like soft and sort of tiptoeing through it, but I think really what we're tired of hearing is everybody goes, I've been through Salina, I've seen all those trailers and everything else, and we're trying to avoid, we're trying to nip that, and so,
And there's no doubt it's going to be a beautiful facility right now.
That's right.
But
That's right.
when our kids are our age,
that's right.
they're the ones that are going to inherit. So, yeah, that it'd be a concern.
That, I would agree that that's a concern of mine as well.
That's why we have laid out the
Right.
alternative there for the planned development district, because best way I can put it is that if you have a planned development district, the city's in the driver's seat. If you have straight I-2 zoning, then the owner/developer is the responsible party.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Andrew. Public comment, Mr. May? I think you've heard kind of the overlying concern, and it's nothing against Old
I know, I
Dominion, but
understand- I
it's-
understand completely, and I appreciate your concern. Do you need
does,
an address?
now, we've got your address on file.
I'm curious.
Do they have the intent of doing landscaping and paving
Yeah, I guess-
as part of this? And then, so that's kind of a baited question, so let me give you the rest of it. And so then, would they have any heartburn with it as a PDD if they intend to do it anyways?
Yeah, a couple things I'd like to point out, and much of what you're picking out is the same thing the Planning Commission put forth. We've modified the contract in order to help the Planning Commission with their decision. The contract's been amended to reflect front yard landscaping consistent with the PC7. Any improved area has to be hard surfaced. So they're readily aware. We would have no objection at all to conditioning the zoning change upon the recording of those deed covenants. That wouldn't be of an issue at all. That's the type of facility they're going to build no matter what. It's part of their plans. They're ready, once this process gets done, they're ready for their plans to come in. It's part of the site plan. I think that's a facility they just recently built, I think, in Topeka. Just to give you a sense. You've got front yard green space, trees, landscaping, et cetera. To answer your question relative to the PDD, my concern there is from a timing standpoint. I know that the Planning Commission talked a little bit about, I think Commissioner Ryan mentioned that, and one thing I certainly think is relevant here is we as the representatives of the Yost Trust and Sid Ritz as the trustee, we've got a vested interest. The Yost Trust has a vested interest in enforcing those covenants because we want the same thing the city wants in order to maintain marketability for the other 30 acres that we have out there. I think that's some of the same idea that you entrust with the Economic Development Group and the Airport Authority is they want to maintain good developable property adjacent, and the Planning Commission found it okay with them, and they found comfort with the fact that we believe that given the remaining assets that they have out there, that they would in fact enforce. Relative to your question earlier about what happens if somebody else comes in and buys it and so on and so forth, that occurs throughout the city as it exists today, regardless of zoning ordinance. You can go out and, at the time the building permit is then requested for modification is when you get the, well, you don't have trees anymore out front because they've all died and landscaping hasn't been maintained, things of that nature. That's when that occurs. So within single ownership, there is, I mean, I don't know that we really see much of that type of enforcement. So I think we felt like the I-2 was a good buffer from the KDOT piece as well. I don't know if you've been out there, but with their open ballasts and things like that, I mean, it was a reasonable, particularly a facility of this caliber being constructed there. It was a good, reasonable buffer from going from the KDOT facility to this, and then to expect and hope for the type of development that we talked about earlier. So the PDD question is, our concern is that's going to put us another 45 days out, and I know that Old Dominion and the size of their organization, there's some people in there that have made grumblings, and I'm not expecting you to make your decision based around that, but we are hearing grumblings about we need to get this done and get it moving, or we need to move on to Plan B.
Yep.
So.
And we would definitely want to respond to business that way, but if timing is an issue, I want to hear from staff why they could move on an I-2 and essentially get going right away, and they couldn't move on a PDD in the same time frame, just for the viewers at home.
Yeah, I think I'll have Dean come back up and answer that. He's more familiar with the timing protocols, but I presume it'd have to go back to the Planning Commission with regards to the plan development aspects.
You would only as a matter of courtesy, but not as a requirement. The Kansas laws lets either the Planning Commission or City Commission do anything that is more restrictive than what is requested without additional public hearings or notices or anything. So if you were to choose to do that as a matter of courtesy, you could send it back to the Planning Commission, but they already had that option in front of them and chose not to exercise it. Or if you chose that option, then we would take the ordinance that's before you and modify it to be a change from Plan C7 to I-2. Instead, it would be Plan C7 to Plan Development District with whatever conditions you thought were appropriate.
Okay, so if we did it as a PDD, is there any difference for the customer from a staff perspective?
The difference is that
if we don't send it back to the Planning
that site
Commission.
plan that you have up there would become binding on Old Dominion and on the property, meaning that if they're showing paving there, then the paving gets done. If they're showing front yard landscaping, that gets done, and they can't deviate from that. Whereas under I-2, with all the best intentions, it could be something else or someone else.
Yeah, and I understand that. I just didn't, Mr. May, his concern was
Be a matter for
the additional time, and I can understand businesses' concern of wanting to move right now. So if there is no difference in the two I-2 or PDD on this, as long as we don't send it back to the Planning Commission.
It'd be a matter of modifying the ordinance that's in front of you today to say Plan Development District instead of I-2 and have whatever conditions that you want to see it carry out.
Okay.
And then would that be, is this an ordinance? Could we do first and second reading, or is this not an ordinance? Is this a situation where we could do first and second reading?
I would defer that to Mr. Bankston. But
So we don't slow that down on the same day?
First and second reading today?
On the same day,
or
once we get
to-
the new ordinance.
I would think certainly with, if it is the commission's wish to go that direction, with the ability to give the notice that you would be giving, that was your intent, that it would probably be premature to try to do that today. So I would think certainly consideration on first and second at a subsequent date would be appropriate.
We just don't want to slow it down if we can.
Right. That's our.
PDD and keep it.
the Planning Commission,
Keep it going.
the
to
Planning
compelling
Commission's
public
had their
purpose.
chance, and it's your decision.
So to cut to the chase, for if instructed by staff, modification of the ordinance to the PDD route, and for that to return to the commission on March the 4th with a first and a compelling interest for a second on March 4th, then it could be turned over to the business entity at that point in time for their development with no further delay.
Well, good question, Mayor. I want to ask Dean, because what Dean's referring to is the documents that are adopted that reflect the conditions. So first, you have to conceptually, of course, decide here today if you'd like to do a planned development district. If so, I assume you'll probably postpone action. Is that what they would do? Postpone action on the item to whatever that date might be? Ask staff to work with the applicant. We need to somehow figure out whether we can today or at a subsequent meeting what your interests are with the planned aspects. And then those would have to be, I'm going to look at Dean and ask the question, those would have to be incorporated into the documents for approval. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
So there has to be time to modify the documents as well.
Right. The legal description would say the same. The primary thing that would be added would be what conditions that we want to see carried out in the field that we want incorporated into the ordinance.
So when you think about it in phases, after we leave today, the first phase is determining what are those requirements. The second phase would be to have those incorporated into the documents, so when they come back to you, you're approving the actual documents with those items. And,
Okay, I understand
and
that.
the timing associated with that.
Mr. Andrew was referring to the paving that's shown in the notation for front yard landscaping. Are we saying that this could be handled with verbiage or citing the specific landscaping plan and where each shrub and tree is located? Which route is that?
What we would probably do is that we would probably draft a condition that said that development of the property as far as landscaping would comply or conform as if it were zoned Plan C7, which means it would be based on the frontage and depth of the lot. It wouldn't necessarily have a specific plan attached to it, but it would say it must meet the requirements of the Plan C7 district for landscaping.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think ultimately, if we can get that done in the same time frame, if that works with them.
Well, yeah, that'd be the
Accomplish the same
modification of
thing,
that
yeah.
ordinance to return to us for the action.
And correct me if I'm wrong, we'd also impose paving standards as if it were PC7.
Right.
Mayor, one quick clarification, if I may. Am I correct, Dean, that in that action would vary from the recommendation of the Planning Commission? Am I correct that the extraordinary majority would be required by the City Commission?
Yes, four votes to do that at today's meeting.
Yes, you can certainly do it, but it does require the extraordinary majority without having to send it back to the Planning Commission.
We're always extraordinary.
Mr. May.
On behalf of the applicant again, I don't have a problem with what we're talking about. I think my concern, what I'm hearing is that what we're talking about is hard surfacing and landscaping, front yard landscaping, which is stuff we've already, buyers okay with, they've contractually agreed to. We're handling by way of deed restriction anyway, so I don't think we're talking about doing anything over and above what we've already agreed to do. So I don't have a problem if we can still get done by next week.
Yeah.
Some of the timing that I hear you, if we're going to, if that's what we're talking about changing and adding to the PDD, then we wouldn't oppose.
Okay. Good. There's always a win-win if you try hard enough.
That's right.
Yeah. Thank you,
So
Mr.
we
May.
just need to postpone to next week? Is that what we need to do?
Request for the
Unless
ordinance
Mr.
change to be
Rollins-
presented.
Well, I think, and again, I'll look to Dean to be sure that we're in agreement here, but am I correct, Dean, that the answer in that we are varying from the recommendation, you would want to take action by at least 4 affirmative votes indicating or directing staff to come back with the revised ordinance, I think. Would be
Reflecting the PDD.
Correct.
That you might confer with their findings, but you disagree with the straight I-2, and so that you would be supportive of a lesser change to a planned development district and direct staff to prepare a modified ordinance that was for a planned development district. You would need to have 4 votes in support of that action in order not to go back to the Planning Commission.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Andrew. Sir?
Thank you, Mayor. Dennis Lauber from the Chamber of Commerce, 120 West Ash. If I could just make 2 quick points and get a sense of, given the discussion, where you're likely headed, and want to thank you and just say thanks for for your help. 2 extra points. You look at this particular site plan. Point to make is not only is the company adding jobs in Salina, but this site plan sets the stage for future expansion with more jobs to come. And again, part of the reason they're looking to move out of their space where they're at now is they see the market opportunity in Salina to grow. And if you can go to the aerial photo, if that's possible, one of the reasons is they looked up and down and around both interstate corridors. One of the reasons they picked this site is this location improves their ability to help with some of the one of the links in the supply chain efficiencies for some of the manufacturers in the community. A couple of their customers are in the photograph that you see right now. And so this is a location that helps them, but not only helps them, but helps some of our quality premier employers in Salina.
Excellent.
But thank you.
Thank you, sir. Have any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, I bring it back to the commission for discussion and any action. I would like to see us move this to the lesser PDD and bring an ordinance change back to us that reflects that.
Yeah.
Can someone help me
Yeah.
word this?
I was heading that way.
No, she's got the word.
With the site plan, though, what I'm trying to determine is if the site plan shows the landscaping and the paved parking that we've been discussing. Is it detailed enough that we can refer back to the site plan that's with our?
We will review that to be sure, but the condition that we would draft would most likely just say that it would need to meet the standards of a commercial district and not without saying that the plan that's on there, but the idea would be that development would conform to the plan that you have presented to you today.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and I'd feel much more comfortable linking it to the verbiage in the plan in case they need to make modifications or anything.
I can't read those things. Okay, Mayor, I would move that the commission make findings that concur with those findings made by the Planning Commission, but reflect a concern with some of the features that are allowed under a straight I-2 zoning, and instead approve a PDD for this area that would require the petitioner to meet the requirements for landscaping and paved parking that are set forth in a commercial district.
Second.
Commissioners, real quick, I'll defer to Greg and Dean. I think what you need to do is have that direction brought back to you next week for the actual approval
Right.
action.
Yep.
So that may have been the intention then in the motion.
Draft a new ordinance that reflects that, bringing that back to us on March 4th.
And do we need to mention the first and second reading as well as part of her motion, or no?
No. The finding for the compelling public interest would,
Wouldn't have to, but if that's the, I mean, wouldn't have to specifically go there, but if that's the wish of the body, that would.
Leave it alone then.
Second.
we have a motion and a second concurring with the nature of the Planning Commission's finding, but desiring change to a PDD to be brought forward in a new draft ordinance for our next scheduled meeting. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carried 5-0. We now move into administration.
Item 8.1, second reading ordinance number 13, 10,678, authorizing a loan agreement with the state of Kansas for the purpose of financing improvements to the water supply and distribution system.
This ordinance, 13-10678, was passed on first reading on February the 11th. Since that time, there have been no comments received. Do we have any public comments or questions of the commission at this point in time? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission for action.
Move we pass ordinance number 13-10678 on second reading.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve ordinance number 13-10678 on second reading. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Angel?
Aye.
Commissioner Crawford?
Aye.
Commissioner Householder?
Aye.
Commissioner Shirley?
Aye.
Mayor Jennings.
Aye. That motion carried 5-0.
Item 8.2, second reading ordinance number 13, 10,679, designating certain streets as main trafficways.
And this ordinance, number 13-10679, was passed on first reading February the 11th. Since that time, we've received no comment. Do we have any public comment on that ordinance today? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission for action.
Mayor, I move we adopt on second reading ordinance number 13-10679.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve ordinance number 13-10679 on second reading. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Angel?
Aye.
Commissioner Crawford?
Aye.
Commissioner Householder?
Aye.
Commissioner Shirley?
Aye.
Mayor Jennings.
Aye. That motion carried 5-0.
Item 8.3, resolution number 136981, authorizing the city of Salina to utilize the Saline County contractor for asphalt overlay and maintenance work on Waterwell, Centennial, and Burma roads.
Mr. Stack.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. Let's see, a few weeks ago, Neil Cable and Dave Nowak, the county engineer and the public works director for county, approached city staff with a request to partner on a couple of streets that are in their 2012 overlay program, maintenance, kind of major maintenance, and Waterwell being one of those, and Burma being another short section, as well as Centennial, a short section as well at the intersection of Waterwell. Thank you, John. I did attach a map showing that. John has brought that up for us. The bottom line is these streets are inside the city limits. So they are kind of half streets shared with the county. A couple of them have right-of-way that's platted. A couple of them are adjacent to a city property, which is the landfill. So that is a distinction that has some merit, I guess, as far as the legal implications of some of the requests that have been made in the past. So the overlay work is scheduled to bid next week, and based on engineer's estimate, the county has an engineer's estimate of the whole project of $438,000 approximately. City portion would be just the lanes that we would be required to pay for or asked to pay for of 9.4% approximately, or $41,000 for those sections that I've mentioned earlier. Since the county hasn't bid the project yet, they were just trying to get an idea from us if we'd be willing to partner with them. We would actually contract directly with the successful bidder, which typically isn't an issue with basically there's only a few suppliers that do that around the area, so they typically work for us a lot of times anyway. But they'd like us to pay them directly instead of having to run it through the county's books, and that was one of the distinctions here. And as far as getting the work done, it happened this summer sometime. Not sure exactly when, but they have quite a few other locations they're working on, or will be working on. I guess the caveat is currently the city and county are engaged in discussions concerning borderline roads as well as the haul routes to the city landfill. I don't believe any resolution has been reached concerning these topics. Greg can answer anything further on that. The city just felt like this is a fair request. It's fairly minimal cost and shows a partnering effort that would be a nice gesture with the new commissioners. It doesn't set any precedent for the future. We don't feel that depending on how the borderline roads and landfill haul routes and tipping fees get resolved at some later date, this commission seems to be wanting to resolve things in a different fashion than before. So we feel like it's a fair gesture to say, okay, we can pay the $41,000 to arguably maintain the roads the way we do it anyway. So it wouldn't be any different if we did it on our own. It would just be a kind of a lane by lane type of approach instead of an overall approach, which we feel is a better approach. So our staff recommendation is to approve resolution authorizing a contract with the Saline County contractor for asphalt overlay and maintenance work inside the city limits on Waterwell, Burma, and Centennial roads for an amount of $41,317 with a 10% contingency, just to give us a little bit of room depending on what we find when we mill it and the base repairs that have to occur and all the things that need to go along with an older road. And I would stand for questions.
Questions of staff? So the recommendation that you just made, Mr. Stack, is based on city limit calculation versus right-of-way calculation.
Correct.
The
The second option would be just right-of-way.
Okay.
I did give you that option as well.
And that, so the ordinance 6981A just goes on city limits. That gives the city the larger burden, which,
Correct.
whether it's right away, it's typically not, but it allows us to just move forward with a good gesture, saying we're going to not be bad guys in this situation, right?
That's correct.
We're just being better than good guys.
Okay.
We're never the bad guys.
Okay, understand.
Bad gang.
Yep. Any other questions of staff? Thank you, Mr. Stack.
Thank you.
Do we have any public comment on this item? If you'd state your name and...
John Price, 1305 Wayne. If we didn't do it this way and we let you do the little bit at the end and the middle, it would be uneven, it wouldn't work. So, and the commissioner said, well, let's just go ahead and do this, and then the city can help us if they want to. And because the price of the stuff that's going up, if we get it done now, we'll all save money in the long run. And so that way we could have put it off and thought on it. We just said, let's fix it. If the city wants to help us, that's fine, and if they don't. But, you know, it is your property that we're doing. It's not ours, so you just can't go down the middle of the road and have a road with a drop-off, you know? And then if we did our part and stopped, where they try to put those together, it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
So we do it all at once, it's done, and we might, and we'll save money, so, thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none, I bring it back to the commission for any discussion and action.
Mayor, may I move we adopt resolution number 13-6981, authorizing the city of Salina to utilize Saline County contractor for asphalt overlay and maintenance work on Waterwell, Centennial, and Burma roads.
Thank you. I think for the clarity, we need to include, because there were two options.
I'm sorry,
Whether that's the 41,317 plus the contingency.
Yeah, A, with the $41,370 with a 10% construction contingency of $4,132. Thank you.
Okay. And was that motion still seconded?
Second, yes.
We have a motion and a second to approve resolution number 13-6981 in the amount of $41,317 with an additional 10% construction contingency. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carried 5-0.
Item 8.4, approve the 2013 vehicles and equipment purchases.
Mr. Franz?
Mayor and Commissioners, bids were open for a number of items, 9 of them, I guess. In early February, you were provided with a spreadsheet showing the bids. I did place at your seats this afternoon a little bit more of an explanation regarding the 2013 vehicles and equipment background information. This was discussed, I believe, last October, November when we adopted the program, but I did identify the items in this bid cycle with yellow highlights if you wish to look at those. Most of the items are straightforward, low qualifying bid recommendations. There are a couple of exceptions. 25-yard Packer truck. The low qualifying bid was actually $153,995 from Elliott Equipment for an international unit. However, we have experienced some difficulties with some of our existing international units, and so the staff is recommending that we spend $55 additional for a Freightliner unit, also from Elliott Equipment. 3 pieces of equipment came in over our estimates: utility vehicle for the landfill, backhoe for the street department, and the lift truck. However, overall pricing on Phase 1 was $4,815 below the estimate. Trades and transfers are listed on the spreadsheet. In most cases, there's either a trade or we will be selling the piece of equipment that's being replaced. There are a couple of errors that I made in noting that information. Those 2 items are regarding the tax sprayer. I'd indicated that we were selling our existing unit, which would be great, but we don't have an existing unit that is comparable to the one we're acquiring. We currently use pump sprayers, hand pump sprayers for that activity. The other one is in regard to the backhoe, in which I did not indicate there was a trade unit, but there is. We were trading the tractor portion of the unit and it currently has a mower mounted on it. So we're essentially switching functions from a mower unit to a backhoe unit, which the staff feels is more appropriate to getting their program of work done. This phase includes 9 of the 39 items authorized for 2013. Total bids were $430,685. The estimate for those items is $435,500. We're recommending that you approve the purchases, and I would stand for any questions. I believe Mr. Peck is here from Central Garage, who has more detailed information about the specifications. If you should have questions regarding that.
Any questions of staff? Thank you, Mr. Franz. Do you have any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I bring it back to the commission for discussion and action.
I move let me try that again. I move to approve report on bids received for Phase 1 vehicles and equipment purchases for 2013 as presented by Rodney France.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the 2013 vehicles and equipment bids as presented. Those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carried 5-0. Do we have any other business at this point in time? Seeing none, I'd entertain a final motion.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? We are adjourned.